Hey, welcome back to the series. So we are going to see how to set up a logging service in Node.js REST API in this episode. So far, whenever we want to log, we are logging with Node.js native console log statement. So instead of that, we need to set up a separate logging service in Node.js REST API so that if you want to use any other external library, you can use it in one file instead of importing that file in every file in the project. And also logging is very important in your Node.js REST API. Not only Node.js REST API in any application, so that you can easily debug your application when it is in production. And also you can actually see by looking at the logger statements, you can actually understand the whole flow of the application as well. Let's get into implementation. Let's look at the files wherever there are log statements. We have to replace those log statements with the logging service that we are going to create now. So, so we have some logs in config file, and let's look at other files. So in the repository, there are no logs. In index.js, we have some logs. In the routes, we have some logs. So, so imagine if you want to change your log statements, if you want to change the format of your logging in production in sometime in the future, you have to change all these places. If you have a common logging service, you can just change in that logging service so that you don't have to change in multiple places. So for that, we need to create a logger, and I created logger folder, and also I created a file called api.logger.js. And in this, we are going to create a class. And in this class, we are going to create methods called log, debug, and error. So those are the most common logging levels. So based on the logging levels, we can just name the methods. So info method will take the message as a parameter, and it will log that message. So we're not using any external or third-party packages for the logging, and we are going to see there are so many packages out there. So we're going to see some in the next episodes. But in this, we're just using plain console.log. And the debug method will take two parameters. One is message and another is data. So usually the debug statements will have more data when you log, and also this debug is not enabled in production environment. And then we have error. So whenever there is an error in the whenever there is an error in the application, you have to log it. So right now we don't have any exception handling in the application. So we are going to see exception handling in the next episodes or in the future episodes. But for now, whenever there is an error, you have to log it through error method. So all it does take is error object, and it will log that error object. If you see all these messages, these has some pattern. So the pattern is all the logger statement starts with API colon, and the error statement starts with API error colon. Now we have created a logger file, and all we need to do is import that file into each other file, and just use it. So let's import that into index.js. So I have imported, and just copy that variable, and instead of wherever there is a logger console.log, let's replace that with logger.debug or logger.info. So remember, logger.debug will take 2 parameters, logger.info will take only one parameter. So that's why we are using logger.info for the last two, and the logger.debug for the process.env statement. And let's go to each file and see whether there are any console log statements. If not, we don't have to use it. If there are some console log statements, all we need to do is import that logger service and use that logger methods. So let's import it here in task detail. Let's replace that with console.log. So now let's go back to history and import the same thing here. Copy this line and paste it there. And use the logger.info method. So there are a bunch of statements in to-do service. So let's use logger.debug since there are multiple parameters. And there are no logger statements in the controller. Let's see the config. We have one logger statement in config file. So let's import logger service here as well. So once imported, all we need to do is just use it as in other files. Just use logger.debug since we have two parameters here. Now let's start the application. So now the application is started, and you can see all the logger statements starts with API colon. And the Express server listening on port 4000, and that statement started with API colon. So that means we are logging all these statements through logger service. So let's post something. So since it is running on port 4000, let's change it, and yep. Now we can see that object, the request body API, the debug statements we can see. Since it's an object, it is actually printing object. So to print the whole thing, we have to change that to JSON. We just need to apply JSON.stringify method on that particular data so that you can actually see the string version of that particular object. Now let's hit that same call again, and this time you can actually see the whole object in a string format. So this level of logging is very important, especially when you are debugging the application. So let's see how we can disable the debug if you are running in production. So for that, all we need to do is we have to maintain a variable.env file, variable in the .env file, which is logger level, or let's change the name to is debug enabled. Okay, so this is a variable we just added to the .env. So all we need to do is just read that variable through process.env, and if is debug enabled true, then only we are printing this statement. Yeah, we just need to add equals to true. It's because it is treating as a string. So we just need to add that equals so that it, the whole the whole check will be true. So now when you hit the post call, we are not seeing the debug object anymore or debug log statement anymore. Let's change that to true. When you change that to true, and now if you make a post call here, we can actually see the entire debug statement with the entire the object. So that is how you enable or disable in production environment. So all we need to do is you have to externalize these environment variables, and you need to maintain these variables outside of your code so that you can enable or disable whenever you want. So if there is any error in the production, so all you need to do is enable this flag so that all the debug statements will be printed so that you will know what is going on in your application. Okay, thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe.